want to give you a little bit of an agenda so that you know what to expect. I'm going to review our agenda. We'll get a welcome from our senior warden. I'll say a prayer. I have some opening remarks. We'll have one of our Vestry members. Today I have Adrian and who else is helping? It is Don. Adrian and Don will be talking to you about the repairs and the upgrades, and then we will have time for questions and comments. And one of the things, Ian, if you can you bring that microphone back down? And in a moment, Ian will have a microphone that'll be here, and if you have a question or a comment, we're asking that you come so that everybody can hear your question or comment. And it's being recorded and streamed so that those who may not be able to be present physically can still participate in this. And so we'll have that down here as well. So, she's still working. Just right here in front of that plate. All right, I'm going to begin. We'll do the order just a little different. I'll begin with the prayer, and then Ann can come up and give her welcome. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Lord Jesus, we give you continual thanks and praise for this place of home, the spiritual home for us, St. John's, and the way you have moved so powerfully here. And we give this day to you, knowing that you have a great future for this community and this congregation through this church. And we just offer up to you those plans that we have and ask that your Spirit would continually direct us and lead us and guide us so that we would continue in that way that you would have us go. And Lord, just again, I thank you so much for this community and the way we each and every day strive to grow to love you and to love our cousins, and to grow in our faith in you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, Ann.
Good morning. It's really nice to see all of you here today. And I just wanted to say on behalf of the Vestry, thank you so much for taking the time to spend 45 minutes talking about what we need to do to upgrade, to repair some things that need to be done for St. John's. We really want to hear from you. So thank you again. And did you all get a handout as you came in? Okay. Thank you.
So, Ann, they should all have a handout and a comment card, is that right? Okay, so you should have a handout that gives you the areas that we're calling our repairs and upgrades, and then another one that it says benefits and values is the second part. So, all right, let me, a couple of things just as a process here. Shelley Howard is here. Shelley Howard is the clerk of the vestry. She's the one that takes all of our minutes. She will be taking notes so that we have those for our record. And then, as I mentioned, the camera is on. It is recording us so that those at home who may not be able to make it can watch. I'm going to give you a little bit of history and then tell you why we've come to invite you to this decision process this day. Some years back, I think it might have been around 2014, we worked as a congregation and did some needs assessment here. And based on that needs assessment, we handed it and did the process to select an architect, and that architect created a master plan for us. That master plan included the max amount of space that you could put on this piece of property, including according to the number of parking spaces and what would be allowed. And that included what we see now, 1/3 of that is this Christian education wing that's the new part. Another piece of that would be a new parish hall. And one of the things that we learned in that construction of the Christian education wing is that our current parish hall is not sustainable in terms of adding something onto it. So we had plans to add on to it, but what we learned is that the pier and beams that were put in there in the original building back in the 1950s We're only down 12 and a half, 12 feet, and because they're at that distance, there's a lot of movement in that building, and if you ever wonder how much movement in that building there is, you just got to go look and walk all 4 walls, and you'll see that everywhere that someone taped and floated on the sheetrock, it is now cracked because that building moves so much. And so we learned that what they really needed to do is go down 25 feet, and so that would require removing that entire parish hall and really going backwards a little bit, the hospitality area and things like that. But that would be the second part of the third. And then the third part of the third would be a space out here, just outside of our current narthex, that would include an air-conditioned area that would allow us to gather. You know how people like to gather outside there? So they would be in a controlled environment. And then that would also allow us to make a direct hallway to the current building and to the restrooms so that it would just be boom, boom, and that would be the third part of that. And from my perspective, that's what we would just do as a church. Well, over the last 2 years, we've had continual issues relating to this particular space, the sanctuary. And so many that we began a discussion with the Vestry in March and April about what direction should we consider next. Should we shift from continuing the master plan and move towards this, or what we should do? We really were not sure what we should do, and we have some opinions, but what we really determined, and the Vestry determined, that the congregation needed to have some information, and that you should have the information, and that way you could help us determine the direction we should consider next. Believe me, we could just go forth without the input of the congregation, but we thought it would be better for us as a community if we included everybody in this decision. And so that's why we're having these open forums today. So here are our hopes from this meeting. One is that you would be familiar with the repairs and upgrades that need to be made in both places, and then also the benefits and values from those repairs and upgrades in both places. We wanted to give you an opportunity to ask questions and also make suggestions. One of the things that I love when you open an idea to a group, it becomes a decision that goes yes and. So yes, this is a good idea, and have you considered, and have you thought about this, and maybe we could do this, and that is one of the great benefits of doing that. And so we hope that you will consider sharing whatever it is that comes to you in this meeting. And then finally, we have another Vestry meeting on August the 17th, and one of the things that we hope to is have a majority of the congregation's feedback and given us a sense of what direction do you believe the Lord is calling us. So that's what that comment card is for. So we do ask as you listen, be willing to make comments on that, and then after you've done a period of prayer discernment and responding, please turn those cards in or send an email to any of the Vestry leaders or myself so that we would have as much information as we possibly could in terms of our decision making, which we hope will come either in August or September about the directions that we move towards next. All right, now let me turn it over. Who's going first? Adrian's going first. To Adrian, and two of our Vestry leaders will lead you through some of these pieces of information. So.
Good morning, everyone. So, Father did an excellent job explaining the reasons why we are looking at this capital campaign. And I think it's really important for those of you that have, and I hope all of you do, the actual paperwork in regards to the Sanctuary Capital Campaign on one side, and then if we can look at the other side in a little bit, the Parish Hall Capital Campaign. And really look at the repairs that we are looking at, because these repairs, when we were talking as a vestry, are really much needed. And these conversations have been going on for a while. I do want to give a thanks to Father Ripp and Reverend Lucy, because they also identified, as well as the vestry, the need to include the congregation in the decision making. because it is really important to get your input on what you want our church, our community to look like. Because it should not just be a vestry in and of itself making these decisions. You all should have the input as well, because again, your ideas are so important as we continue the growth of this wonderful community. So when you look at some of the repairs on the sanctuary, we're going to start there first. It's pretty expensive. We are looking at some significant areas that we really need to upgrade or repair. And the first one really starts with the new organ. And we are very much aware that we are going to need a new organ. The one that we have, it's like on its last, whatever organs do, it's on its last piece of that. I don't know organ mechanics, but it was explained to me by Dawn, and I do appreciate that. I just heard the price tag, and I was like, oh goodness. So we're going to need a new organ. We're going to have to look at using some risers in the choir loft. I mean, we're going to have to, in some form or fashion, we're going to have to strengthen that foundation piece, and we're going to be adding a new organ because we just can't leave the loft as it is. The sturdiness of it, the sound, we're also going to be looking at as well. And not only that, we're also going to be looking at our space and look at the space that we inhabit every time that we come into this wonderful sanctuary. What are the pews going to look like? We're going to have to look at either a replacement or an upgrade on these pews because they are quite old. And that would include the seat cushions, the kneelers, the lecterns that you see here, the altar rail. We want to expand the North X. And I think one of the things that Father mentioned last week was really the North X is not an area to have conversation. It's really an area to prepare yourself to come into sanctuary and worship. And when you're having conversation, it takes away from the experience of coming into a holy place. So we're going to have to expand that because we know people have to discuss and have conversations. We're very much aware of that. But by the same token, we also have to understand what is our sacred space. And the North X prepares us to enter into this wonderful sacred space. Looking at replacing some outside doors. Now, we don't have an additional exit door, which we would like to include, so some type of an emergency door would be something that we're looking at as well. We know that when you do any type of upgrades, we're going to have to look at the carpet and flooring. I don't know, and I forgot how long we've had this flooring, but it's been quite a bit of time. Am I correct on that one, Dawn? So that's something that we definitely have to address. And then the lighting. When you look at some of the lighting issues that we have here in our sanctuary, that's some of the things that are really not conducive at times, especially when you're looking at our special events that we do across the year. And of course, how do we address that lighting as we continue with the new systems that we want to put in? And then we have electric issues within our sanctuary space. And these electric issues are pretty significant in regards to having to address them. We have old wiring that's in the church. We have, well, the reality of it is the wiring's pretty much out of code. So whatever the code is, we would definitely have to upgrade to that level. That's an expense in and of itself. But as you continue looking down, we're not going to be able to upgrade our organ, our sound issues, our audio or video with the electric capacity that we have right now. We're going to have to address that as we move forward. And I really want there to be more of a why, as we continue. Why are we looking at this? I know there's the explanation on the benefits and the values in that piece, but I want to bring Don up because he did an excellent job, as we discussed yesterday, on why we're having to do this investment. And I think it's important to hear that. And then after that, we'll go into some discussion, and then we'll look at the Parish Hall capital campaign.
Morning. Adrian pretty much covered everything, but just some issues. He talked about the electrical. We are maxed out, and a lot of this electrical has been here since the church started. And so it itself, just because of age, the wiring is breaking down. We've had issues with the panel back here where one of the wires just fried because it was basically you're putting too much amperage in a small area. So it overheated and it just fried the wire. And luckily it was just for the air conditioner for that time. I'm standing up here, we're talking about the lighting. And if you look up and you see those little recessed cans they have up there and how they kind of move in a wave form. Well, as they're doing that, this is in a shadow, that's in a shadow, that's in a shadow, that's in a shadow. So we don't have equal lighting in here, and that's something that we want to kind of address. So, and how we do that, we'll leave that to the architect and the approval committee for that. He talked about the flooring. As you walk around, you can see it's buckling in a lot of different places. Carpet stretches. I mean, just walking on it, you're going to start stretching carpet. But how far do you do it before the carpet is so thin that it's no good anymore? And so it is a drastically, and the need for this much carpet may not be necessary. We may have a runner and do something else with the flooring itself. There's many options we can do on that. I know one person was telling me that even we can come in and stain the concrete. We can do that without putting flooring down. So there's options there. And then on the organ, I've heard a few stories about the organ, about where it came from. One was Christ Church in San Antonio, and the other one was St. Mark's in San Antonio. Well, to give you an idea, if it came from St. Mark's, Robert E. Lee listened to that organ. Matter of fact, he was on the vestry at St. Mark's, so he obviously, if that was their organ, then that's how old that is. And it can be repaired, but how often are we going to have to keep doing that repair? And at what cost is that going to take us? And so that's the reason why the organ console itself is failing, and that's the big part of it. And then we have some pipes, they're called ranks, certain ranks are just deadening it out. So you don't get the quality. It sounds good to our ears because that's all we hear, but you know, if you put something new over here and something old over here, you're going to see a distinct difference, even though they may be the same product. It's just because they age out. So other than that, if you have any questions, I can maybe field a question. I can't hear you.
If you want to come up to the mic, that would be helpful so everyone can hear.
Yeah. And I can't hear anyway, so it doesn't, you know. Yes.
It may or may not be on. With regard to the exit doors, where were they thinking?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. The exit door, we don't know where it's going to be. Ideally, it's going to be in this wall. Okay. We could do a thing like turning the wall this way and pushing the door out, so you don't look at a door. You just see kind of a entryway there. But it would have to be here. We have no room over here. This room is full of electrical and gas lines, all down outside this wall. So we can't put it back here. Again, there's the major electrical panel. That's more electrical over there. That's running
inside. Into the retaining wall. And then even beyond that, you're straight into.
And then you have the retaining wall, and you have these support beams. So ideally, over here we do have the room for that. Okay. So you know, say like where you're at to the left, and we just break that open and go through there. This is a double rock wall. It's about this thick. You know, so we'd have to cosmetically fix that and go in that way. So that'll be determined basically when we get architectural drawings and structural engineers to look to see how we're going to do that. Good. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I'll turn it back over to Adrian.
So if y'all have any thoughts or ideas as well that you would like to see, by all means, please share, because that's important. You know, last week when we met, individuals had some ideas that they would like to see when we look at some new renderings of what we want this to look like. So if you have any ideas, you can put on your comment card, or you can definitely let us know as well. That would be very beneficial. We can then go ahead and look at the Parish Hall capital campaign. And one of the things that I also want to mention, it doesn't mean that it's an and or an or. It could be both. We haven't decided what that looks like. I mean, it's just not one or the other. We are looking at maybe could we do both. It depends on the circumstance. But let's look at what the Parish Hall capital campaign would look like. So as Father indicated earlier, when you look at the Parish Hall, there is some indication that it is going to need some really sound structural engineering, because the stability of that building is not conducive to long-term use. So that's one of the things that we would definitely have to address. And if we have to really look at going down further, could we do that by getting a different type of engineer to come out? I mean, is it just having to, in some form or fashion, utilize a new structure? That's something Don and I were talking about. Maybe there's a way that we can salvage it by going out and looking at some different options. We don't know. But the reality of it is, the way that it is today is not going to get us and move us to the future in that building. We would need a larger space. That would be something that would be a definite benefit, because the space that we have, again, is really not conducive to the events that we like to put on during the year. Kitchen. You know, the kitchen itself is pretty outdated. I mean, how many of y'all been in that kitchen? Yeah, I've been in that kitchen too. I'm like, whoa, this is hard. If you had to make a meal here, you know what I'm saying? But we do. We do, and that's the reality of it, and it is difficult. It's a very difficult space. So that kitchen in and of itself, I think that would be a tremendous upgrade in what we would need to do in order to make it conducive to moving in the future. Adult education. You know, that's one of the things dear to my heart. Adult education is so important, as for our children's education as well. We would look for space to have larger class sizes or larger classrooms in order to continue our adult ed. And again, audio-visual, you know, the ability to be able to do presentations, the ability to do PowerPoints or whatever the case may be, that would be something that we would be looking at upgrading. And not only that, the potential outreach. You know, one of the things that's so important for our community is how we outreach to the community in and of itself. What type of facilities do we have that we have the ability to continue with that outreach? That's critical if we're going to continue to grow as we are. And then looking at the bathrooms and storage, and you know, the reality of it is that storage, especially when we heard last week, is a big deal, because you know, the programs that we put on and the events that we have to store the items and the materials that we use. So what does that look like? And of course, you know, do we need more bathrooms? Which of course, you know, we definitely always need more bathrooms, but what that would look like as well as we continue to grow. How does it match the need that we have as far as with the growth that we are looking at? So as you can see on some of the benefits, it's really looking at the growth that we have as a community and moving forward with that growth so that we can continue to reach out to the community and build the community that we have here at St. John's. Is there anything you want to add on the parish piece? The parish hall? Okay. So I think that you all have been in that area more than once, and I think you all have seen the need. But do you all have any other thoughts or ideas that you think would be beneficial? Yes, Clark.
You know, as I looked around at the early service and also at this room right now, I see a lot of people who weren't here the last time we did this, which in and of itself is really, really exciting to me. So the last time we did this, we did it exactly the way you're supposed to do. We brought in consultants, and they talked to everybody in the parish very confidentially and asked, how much can you give? And it was all it was just done perfectly. And they came back with a recommendation, and they said, I want to turn around. They said, this is what you can do. This is how much money you can raise. And we had a list that was this big. And you know, we really had a kind of a crisis there, because they said, you can do this, and we wanted to do this. And the fact is, we didn't listen to them. And what we did was so unpredictable by human standards that nobody really anticipated that we could have done what we did. So before we get into sort of arguing about my favorite thing is to have, you know, an organ, or my favorite thing is to have a new kitchen, I got one recommendation. It's 2 words. Be bold. I really, really mean it. Be bold. We're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing it for the people that we haven't met yet. who are going to be coming into this place, and we're doing it for our children. And so all I can say is, be bold.
Ron is coming up to share thoughts.
To be an adjunct to his little talk, have we looked in, if we go down on these menus on the left and the bottom and top of this page, has anybody done an estimate? Have we had anybody come to us and say, okay, this is going to cost $2.6 million to do if we do everything?
No. There's guesstimates, but there's not estimates at this point.
Well, I'm going to be, instead of being bold, I don't think it's right for us not to have projects, something that we're committed to. You know, when we become members of the church, we become committed to the ministries of the church. And the ministries of the church evolve from what kind of space do we have to offer these ministries in. And I would say be bold, but also we need to come back to this group again and say, okay, this is what the estimated cost is going to be, and then let's figure out if we can pay for it.
I think that's a really good point, and I think one of the things that Father Ripp mentioned last week is that you can have an estimate, and in that estimate, you need to probably include a 30% upcharge to that estimate, because the reality of it is when you start doing work and demolitioning and whatever the case may be, you always find something. Absolutely. I mean, how many of us has watched HDTV and they come back, oh, you can get all of this done for $85, and then $135,000 later, you're still there. So, I mean, that's the reality of it. Anytime you start looking at some very old structures and you're trying to revitalize it, it's hard not to think that there's things that are not going to come across that you'd have to address that you may not have thought of. Father, do you want to add something?
One of the things I really like is not to get into a spitting contest, you know, as you kind of mentioned. And I think part of the reason that we brought it before you is simply because the guesstimates that we have put both of these projects at probably 1.5 million or so. Your organ, if you do the construction to remove that place, make sure the footing, the floor is stable, which has been a concern. There's some other things that have to be up there. The organ itself, I think, is one estimate we got was $450,000. But it's all the other work that has to go around it to make sure that it works right. One of the interesting things, if y'all look back there, this is interesting. You see how we have this this balcony, and then you have that 3-foot little space that's covered right there? Well, one organ person who we did have come in just to kind of give us an idea of what we might need to look at said that that is solid, and what you should actually do is make that a open rail, because music or sound is much like light, and it travels in a line. And if you were to remove that and make it a rail, you would have even more sound from the choir and the organ coming down to the congregation. As it is, the people who hear the organ the best are the 2 or 3 or 4 people sitting up here. Isn't that an interesting deal? So part of the reason that I think we might be suggesting where do you all want to move this direction or that direction is because the cost is fairly significant. Now, as Clark said, we did make a decision, I say we, and that was the whole congregation, not the vestry or the priest, to move forward on a project that was way beyond our means. And then if you all recall, Catherine Deal's estate was sort of dropped into our lap at the value of $800,000. So that's a pretty nice gift from Catherine and the Lord moving in her life. But we're not sure that that's possible. So if you have a leaning, I would say give us a leaning. If your indication is be bold, then the vestry can go and work on that path. And then maybe by the October meeting that we have, we can come back with another, we will definitely have an update for you then. So, all right, I just want to make that comment, so.
Sir, are there any more thoughts, suggestions, ideas? Please.
I feel like we've had so many concerns with that parish hall that's here now, and I would sure hope that we would get a price on demolishing that and kind of starting over with the life support rather than continue to patch and go out. I think knowledge is power.
I think you make a very good point, and I think that's what we're going to be looking at when we get estimates. It's just not on one particular piece, but what it looks like if we were to do different things within that framework.
This does feel weird to have my back toward people, and so I'm going to stand sideways. Along the lines of what Clark has said about being bold and Ron about being careful, one of the things that I'd like to see us think about is the organ. And do we need an organ? Are there alternatives for an organ that will create space for digital media and the teams? Can we find an organist in 100 years? Are there people training to play an organ? And what is that cost going to look like if churches are in demand of an organ? So I think if we can really discern, does St. John's in New Braunfels, Texas need an organ? Is that a cost worth expending to our congregation?
That is a absolutely great point, too. When I was thinking about it and I heard the cost, I was thinking, what about a nice drum set, I don't see drums up there. It'd be something new,
When we're talking about building this for
Right.
the future, there are younger people that don't relate to that instrument and the contemporary nature of music. And so music being a big part of worship for folks who are older, and maybe in my generation and beyond, that's important. But for the future, is an organ important? Is that particular musical instrument and cost of value to St. John's?
Great point. Any other thoughts? Yes, sir.
What are you saying, Ripp?
That I love hearing from all the voices.
Oh, Ripp probably already knows what I'm going to say. Anyway, I look over all of this and repairs, the benefits, values, and so forth. I'll kind of turn around. Most people don't have problems hearing me. Yeah, let's turn the mic around. Yeah, most people don't have problems hearing me. Whether or not we're talking about a sanctuary campaign or a parish hall campaign, the question I think a lot of times we need to ask ourselves, what attracts people to the Episcopal Church? Think about that. I know over the years, I'm a cradle Episcopalian. And more times than not, I know I've had the opportunity throughout the years to lead various newcomer classes, teach the Book of Common Prayer classes that Ripp's asked me to fill in for him when he's gone, the Book of Common Prayer. And many times I ask the people in these courses, why did you come to the Episcopal Church? Because we've got Oakwood Baptist, we've got First Baptist over here, we've got Green United Methodist Church. What is unique about the Episcopal Church? More times than not, it always focuses around worship. Ripp's sermon this morning really fed right into it as far as your bedrock. Our bedrock is that cross and that table right there. Okay, I know I've had a past rector that always told us that what this parish will always focus around is the breaking of the bread at God's table. So we're very blessed in that within the Episcopal Church in 1549, this little thing right here was written. In every Episcopal church around the United States, everything, the vast majority of the service is identical, with the exception of 2 areas. Those 2 areas, one of them, the only way you can change that is if you want to change clergy, that's called the sermon, and the other area is the music, because the liturgy pretty much comes from this book right here. So every Episcopal church is doing exactly the same thing every Sunday, whether or not here, St. Mark's, Christ Church. But that's what I usually hear, and I think most people would agree with what attracts them to the Episcopal Church is coming through those doors to experience the worship, and how that comes about is the beautiful liturgy that we offer in this place, culminated by the breaking of the bread and then going out 2 by 2 to spread the word. So whether or not it's a new organ, we were blessed. Was blessed recently to hear from one of the principal organ manufacturers here in the United States. He really got me excited, because he said because of that liturgy, one of the areas being the music is good music is designed to augment or assist the beauty of the worship and the liturgy. A good, finely tuned instrument should get people excited to want to stand up and sing. So it's very important that excitement is there. So those are just kind of some of my comments that I'd like to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. So Don's going to share a little bit about the parish hall, just so you have some understanding in regards to what needs to be done there, just other than the parish hall. And then we'll go ahead and close it out after that.
Just as well, some of you may know, but some of you may not know, the parish hall isn't that building when we talk about replacement. That pier and beam structure goes all the way back to our entryway where the women's restroom starts. So everything coming this way, which is all pier and beam, which would have to be redone. So I just didn't know if a lot of people actually realize that, but you can really notice it. When you walk in, you'll see the floor is wrinkled on both sides. That's something we can never get away with, or away from, excuse me, because of this is moving and that's not, so it's going to pull and stretch and go up and down. So I just wanted to bring that up. And as far as with our goals and stuff, when we look at all this is repair or replace. And so all the options are going to be looked at, but I have my own remodeling business, and the one thing that I can't tell a customer is what's behind that wall or what's under that floor. I can't tell them that. And sometimes when you get in there, you just have to say, I can't fix bad. And you have to go and start over. So just some thoughts when we get into this. And if anybody's done any remodeling, they know once they open up the wall, it's, oh, I didn't know about that. So there's options down the road to think about when we're doing everything. So that's why we're doing replace or repair. So.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Please make sure that you all have that card and you fill it out so that we can have that information for the vestry. We'll be looking at the information that you all have given us, your ideas and suggestions, and we're going to have those discussions as we continue in August and moving forward. And like Father had indicated, we're definitely going to come back to give you the information in regards to costs once we cross that river, as they say. I do want to add one thing. I would be remiss if I didn't, but as the Adult Education Committee Chairperson, last year there was this wonderful course in the summer that was actually taught by me, and it was called Pray, Decide, and Don't Worry, 5 Steps to Discerning God's Will. Wonderful book. Y'all should get it, but the instruction was even better. But with that being said, one of the first things in discernment, those of you that took the class, and I don't see many people in here, but those of you that did, it was seek. That was the first stage, to seek. And that's what we're doing today. We're seeking. We're seeking your input. We're seeking your guidance. We're seeking your thoughts, suggestions, and ideas so that when we look at what we need to do moving forward with our community, that we have your input in that decision making. And part of seeking, it talked a little bit about in that chapter, was fear. And what I love to hear today is that many people put aside that fear, and it indicated for us to be bold, because that's who we are as a community. That's why I love St. John's, because we are a bold people. Now, it doesn't mean, though, that in our discernment, in our decision making, that we're not thoughtful of what we do, but we have to be understanding that fear will always be there, but we have to be mindful of what that is. So once you do start looking at some of these estimates that we bring to you, I want you to have understanding that fear is far different than shock, okay? So shock may be there, like when you go and you want to buy a car and you're thinking that can't be the price. And the reality of it is the price. But it doesn't mean that we won't, in some form or fashion, look at how we strategize to be bold and not be fearful as we seek. Thank you.
Again, as Ann said, I really appreciate you all being here to take time to discern with us what it is this congregation is going to do next. A couple of things that I would say to you, or a couple of things to say. Thank you to Adrian and Don for their presentation. Appreciate you all doing that work. Also would like to suggest to you, if there's someone here that you know is a part of this community and weren't able to make it, I really encourage you to say something to them. If you were here for our last major project, the Horizons Capital Campaign Group, they got 90% of the people involved in this, right? So at some level, everyone's going to be involved. So be sure and talk this up. The other thing that is a piece that you should be aware is the estimates and the information, some of the stuff you want. A lot of times you can get it from people, but it's not always free. You have to get a consultant that helps us with that. We have a great guy, Sherman Tapley. Sherman is phenomenal in helping this congregation. In fact, you may not be aware, but he's done so much work and he's never asked for anything from us when he's doing some of this stuff. The Vestry voted a couple of months ago to give him a nice check just to tell him thank you for all that he does. It is also remind you why I have encouraged us as a community to continue to give to a capital campaign fund so that we have that seed money when we do this. So if that's something that you're interested in giving to or doing, I forgot to tell the group last week, that is always helpful as we move forward in this work. The last thing, thank you all for loving this congregation and being interested enough to be here. That's just phenomenal. And it tells me between the two groups, we've had a really good crowd. It tells me that there is some encouragement, as Adrian said, to be bold, and so that's what we'll do. All right, let us go forth in the name of Christ.